This is the VOA Special English Education Report. A recent story in the Chronicles of Higher Education said many foreign students report feeling lonely or unwelcome in Australia. Those feelings are one of the reasons why Australia is taking a close look at its international education industry. The government has formed an advisory council to help develop a 5-year national strategy for the future of international education in the country. But wherever international students go, making friends may not always be easy. The Journal of International and Intercultural Communication published a study done in the United States. Elizabeth Garies of Baruch College in New York surveyed 454 international students. They were attending 4-year colleges and graduate schools in the American South and Northeast. Students from English-speaking countries and from Northern and Central Europe were more likely to be happy with their friendships. But 38% of the international students said they had no close friendships in the United States. And half of the students from East Asia said they were unhappy with the number of American friends they had. Professor Garies says 30% said they wished their friendships could be deeper and more meaningful. Elizabeth Garies says many East Asian students blame themselves for their limited friendships with Americans and for not knowing the culture well enough. VOA's Jessica Stahl did her own survey to find out how American students and foreign students relate to each other through her blog, The Student Union. More than 100 students, about half of them American, answered her online questions. Half of the international students and 60% of the Americans said they related as well or better to the other group than to their own group. 85% of the Americans said they had at least one international friend. But only about half said they have more than 2 international friends. Among the foreign students, 75% said they have more than 2 American friends, but 10% said they have no American friends. Not surprisingly, Professor Garies says students who make friends from their host country return home happier with their experience. She says the students are more satisfied with their stay, have better language skills, and have better attitudes toward their host country. For VOA Special English, I'm Mario Ritter.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. Bees add an estimated $18 billion a year to the value of American crops. They pollinate flowers that become fruits, nuts, and vegetables. But in recent years, honeybee colonies in the United States and Europe have been shrinking. Scientists have proposed different theories to explain what is known as colony collapse disorder. New research suggests that a commonly used group of insecticides could cause bees to have a hard time finding their way back to their hive. The new research looks at the use of pesticides called neonicotinoids. They were first used in the 1990s. They are now put on the seeds of many major crops around the world. The seedlings absorb the chemical as they grow. And that means farmers do not need to spray a whole field. Instead, there is a little bit of insecticide inside each plant, including the pollen and nectar that the bees want. There is not enough pesticide to kill them, but the new research in the Journal of Science says it may harm them anyway. Researchers stuck microchips to the backs of the bees. These chips recorded the bees' movements as they came and went from their hive. The scientists fed some bees sugar water with a low dose of a neonicotinoid. The study found that these bees were about twice as likely not to return as other bees. Michael Henry from INRA, the French National Agriculture Research Institute, says the bees basically get drunk. He says intoxicated honeybees with those small doses may just get lost and are not able to find their way back home. For some crops around the world, wild pollinators like bumblebees are more important than honeybees. Dave Golson at the University of Stirling in Britain worked on another study in Science. He says the pesticides could help explain why bumblebee populations are also decreasing. He says there were 85% fewer queens produced than when they had been exposed to what he called realistic field levels. Bayer Crop Science makes neonicotinoid pesticides. Company spokesman Jack Boyne disputed the findings. He says the authors dosed the bees at levels far greater than what would commonly be experienced in the field. He also notes that researchers are studying other factors that could affect bee populations. Some European countries have banned the pesticides, and there are growing calls to ban them in the United States as well. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. This summer, the remains of what had been Hurricane Isaac moved over the American Midwest. The storm brought rain to areas suffering from a severe drought. But the rain came too late to save many farmers' corn and soybean crops. Crop insurance will help limit financial losses, but crop insurance is a tool that is not available to most growers in the developing world. The United States federal government helps pay for the cost of insurance against natural disasters. Not every farmer in America chooses to buy crop insurance. Dick Thompson of Boone, Iowa, says he operates his farm the way farmers did in the past. I'm old-fashioned, and I'm proud of it, he says. Dick Thompson uses little chemical fertilizer, weed killers, or insecticides. He does not grow genetically modified crops. He says his methods helped him survive the drought, and he says they are already earning him more money per hectare than his neighbors who farm the modern way. Scientists are trying to understand why his methods are working. Matt Liebman has copied many of them in his research fields at Iowa State University. He says he is trying to understand some of the scientific mechanisms that explain the results Dick Thompson observes on his own farm. Many Iowa farms today grow only corn and soybeans. Payments from crop insurance keep farmers in business when their crops do poorly, as in this year's drought. But Dick Thompson says he has never bought crop insurance. Instead, he protects himself by growing other kinds of crops in addition to corn and soybeans. He raises hay and oats, along with cattle and pigs. He harvested his oat crop before the drought hit. He says it's common sense. But now farmers are growing hay on only half as much land as they did 20 years ago. And oat production has fallen by almost 95%. Livestock production has also fallen. Dick Thompson says he will sell some of his cows and hogs, but not all of them. They provide more than money. They also make manure that he uses to fertilize the soil instead of chemical fertilizers. The manure helps the soil hold water. Iowa State University researcher Rick Cruz says that helps crop growth even in drought conditions. And these are the stressful conditions that farmers everywhere might face more often because of climate change. Matt Liebman says his research shows that all farmers can learn from Dick Thompson. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
For VOA Learning English, this is the Science Report. British scientists say they have found the oldest known evidence of war. Researchers discovered the remains of 27 people during a dig near Lake Turkana in northern Kenya. Scientists say they believe the remains are from a Stone Age culture of about 10,000 years ago. The so-called Nataruk fossils show signs of a violent attack. The dig also uncovered weapons, including arrows, clubs, and stone blades. The scientists published a paper on their findings in the journal Nature. Marta Mirazón Lar was the lead investigator. She studies human ancestors at the University of Cambridge in Britain. She wrote that the victims were people who hunted, fished, and gathered plants for food. She described the 10,000-year-old battle in which they were killed as a brutal attack. One skeleton was found with a blade of volcanic glass still stuck in his head. A woman in late pregnancy appeared to have been bound by her hands and feet. The bodies were not buried after their death. Some had fallen into water that has since dried up. Their bones were protected by the Earth's soil. Many experts had thought war did not begin until humans started to form settled communities. But the Nataruk people were hunter-gatherers of an earlier period. They moved from place to place in search of food. Scientist Lar said the findings raise the question of whether warfare has been part of the human experience for much longer than previously thought. The remains include 21 adults and 6 children. Most of the children were younger than 6. For VOA Learning English, I'm Anna Mateo.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. This June in Brazil, delegates will mark the 20th anniversary of what is commonly known as the Earth Summit. The United Nations Conference on Environment and Development took place in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. One of the issues that the delegates plan to discuss in June at Rio Plus 20 is the role of agriculture in climate change. A recent article written by a team of scientists says agriculture should be a top priority in climate change negotiations. It says there was some progress in this area, but not much, at the United Nations Climate Conference in December in Durban, South Africa. The article, "What Next for Agriculture After Durban?" appeared in the journal Science. Britain's chief scientific advisor, Sir John Bennington, led the international team that wrote it to try to influence policymakers. Molly John from the University of Wisconsin-Madison was one of those authors. She says efforts to guarantee food security are falling short in significant ways that have come to our attention, especially recently with the significant price shocks. Prices on the world market have remained high since the food crisis of 2007 and 2008. Professor Jean says agriculture is a major producer of greenhouse gases blamed for trapping heat in the atmosphere. But agriculture also offers ways to lessen their effects with known and proven farming practices. She says agriculture is threatened by climate change, especially in vulnerable parts of the world. But agriculture also represents an opportunity to better manage meeting our needs while we reduce the emissions of various greenhouse gases that are accumulating in the atmosphere. Professor Jean says moving toward climate-smart agriculture should be at the center of policy considerations. The scientists call for reducing the huge amount of food that gets wasted or goes bad before it can be eaten. Another recommendation is to plant more crops that put less pressure on the environment. The article says the integration of agriculture in the climate change negotiating process has been moving slowly. At the same time, climate change and population growth have been moving much faster. The article calls on scientists to play a bigger part in the issue by making sure climate change negotiators have clear data available. Such information, they say, could help increase investment in agriculture. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Prisuti.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. June, July, and August are vacation months for most American school children. But some students pay a high price for that long summer break. They may forget much of what they learned over the past year by the time they start the next grade. The problem is often called the summer learning gap. Growing efforts across the country aim to deal with this gap by offering more interesting summer school programs. Some students already attend summer school, but that is often because they received bad grades during the regular school year. At Bushman Elementary in Dallas recently, students read out loud about communities in a third grade social studies class. But the 9 and 10-year-olds were also studying art. Visual arts instructor Ron Oliver works to combine the two subjects. The kids that never get it, he says, like the 30% that always struggle on testing, they thrive in this kind of atmosphere. Ron Oliver says some kids just learn differently. In addition to reading, the students express themselves in picture form by drawing community scenes. One boy told us he was expressing his feeling through drawing. "You only use the pictures," added one girl. She said pictures can tell the words for you. "You don't need words," she said. Their teacher is Gloria Pegram. She has taught elementary school for 15 years. She says art helps with memory. Gloria Pegram says teachers even try to be creative with math. She says teachers try to use a hands-on activity whenever possible to help students remember better. Gloria Pegram says students who do not take summer enrichment classes often need to relearn lessons when they return in the fall. This is especially true of low-income students. They are less likely, for example, to live near public libraries offering books to read and special summer reading programs. Ed Pauley is Director of Research and Evaluation at the Wallace Foundation. The nonprofit group has invested $50 million to study which programs work best to prevent summer learning loss. Ed Pauley says poor kids can lose as much as 3 months of learning over the summer. He says one promising method has been to include art in summer programs. Ed Pauley told us teaching through the arts gets kids excited about being in school every day. And the arts use reading and math, so they are a great way to tie together learning experiences. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. An American intelligence report says water-related problems will likely increase tensions around the world in the next 10 years. These problems include water shortages, poor water quality, and floods. The report says the problems will increase the risk of instability and the failure of governments. However, countries are seen as unlikely to go to war over water. The report says water tensions have historically led to more water-sharing agreements than violent conflicts. But beyond 10 years, it warns that some governments could use water as a weapon to pressure others. And water could also be used to further terrorist objectives. The report is called an Intelligence Community Assessment on Global Water Security. It looks at possible effects of water problems on United States national security interests over the next 30 years. It says the areas that will be most affected by water problems are North Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton announced the report on World Water Day, which was observed March 24th. The National Intelligence Council wrote the report based on a national intelligence estimate she requested a year ago. The report says water-related problems could distract countries from working with the United States on important policy goals. But it also predicts an increased demand for American aid and expert help to solve those problems. That demand could create opportunities for leadership and influence. The report says water shortages, poor water quality, and floods by themselves are unlikely to result in state failure. But these could combine with poverty, social tensions, environmental problems, poor leadership, and weak governments to produce social disorder. And that combination could cause state failure. The report predicts that from now through 2040, water shortages and pollution probably will harm the economic performance of important trading partners. During the next 10 years, it says, the loss of groundwater supplies in some agricultural areas will create a risk to national and global food markets. These shortages will be a result of poor management. Agriculture uses about 70% of the world's fresh water. The report says technology that reduces the amount of water needed to grow crops will offer the best defense against shortages. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Science Report. The amount of fish being caught worldwide is much larger than has been reported. And that could mean serious problems for the environment and nations that depend on fisheries. A new estimate places the world fish catch at 109 million metric tons. That is 32 million tons higher than the yearly totals governments have been reporting. The same report notes that the world's fish catch has been shrinking since the late 1990s. Countries report their industrial catches to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. But they do not report other kinds of fishing. This includes that fishing done for recreation and individual food, and the catches of small commercial fisheries, known as artisanal fisheries. Daniel Pauly of the University of British Columbia led the study. He noted that a large percentage of the world's fish catch is thrown away. He told VOA that better estimates of the actual global catch will help ensure there will be enough fish in the future. He added that fish catches have been decreasing since 1996. The researchers also found ways that the world's fisheries are changing. It found that fishing fleets of larger nations are catching fish in the waters of developing countries more and more. Daniel Pauly said he was surprised by the amount of fishing done by foreigners in competition with local fishers. He said many European and Asian fishing boats are operating in waters off the coast of West Africa, for example. The online journal Nature Communications published the findings. For VOA Learning English, I'm Jonathan Evans.